Hello. Welcome back to the One Shot Show. This is where GMs go to level up. My name is Matt. I'm joined here this week, as in all weeks, by Patty. Today, we are talking about the concept of Ma, or negative space. We are not going to get through this entire topic if I go at that pace the whole
Absolutely
time.
not. But...
So I'm dropping the bit, but we're talking about Ma,
Yeah.
which is the concept that comes from a lot of Japanese art of negative space and the idea that the negative space is just important as the space that holds the content, the visage, the presence, because that is what makes it meaningful.
Yeah.
I think that's a concept we all intuitively understand, even if we haven't heard it in those terms. But we want to specifically talk about applying it to our games.
Yeah, I put it onto the docket because have you seen that there's a weirdly long variety interview with Brennan Lee Mulligan and Matt where they do basically a directors on directors but about GMing?
I've seen it. I haven't watched it, but I've seen that pop
There's
up.
a little bit, they fall off it pretty quick, but they almost go into a full discussion of Ma, and it was really interesting. Brendan brings it up in relation to he talks about it in, I always say the name wrong, Kuwasaka?
Oh, Kurosawa, the director.
Kurosawa,
Yes,
thank you.
Yes, Akira Kurosawa. Yeah.
And the way that that Ma, the idea of moments of seeming emptiness inside the narrative, are there to punctuate moments of violence. And they talk a little about that in terms of how that can impacts how a GM could write and frame in an adventure. But as I came out of that that interview, I was thinking, I feel like Ma exists in lots of spaces in TTRPGs, but it's hard to identify because it's negative.
Well, and we think as well, surely not doing anything in our RPGs is boring, but that's not true. What it actually is it's just the absence of a thing that needs to be punctuated. The easiest way I can illustrate this is if every fight was a boss fight. Look, boss fights are cool, but they would become significantly less cool very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I think this is something that a lot of new players bounce off at a certain point where they go, well, I want to do more of the thing that I like and think is cool. And then someone delivers that to them. And they stop having a good time.
Yeah.
And often they will unwittingly blame the GM. They'll go, oh, well, you're not really doing it well enough then. I used to find this sort of thing so fun. I love puzzles. I of course, I'd love a game where every single session was solving a whole bunch of puzzles.
I love a 4.5 hour encounter with a single big bad enemy. I love that. That's what I'm here for, right?
So I'd do that every single session. But actually, if you did that every single session, it would get boring very quickly. We sort of, funny enough, we talked a bit about this version of this back when we discussed yes and both times. This thing of the over-enablement of the good thing. If the only thing you ever get is yes, then the game actually gets very boring very quickly. The no is Ma. It is a form of Ma. It is the absence of progress, movement, momentum. It is the absence of success, the thing we believe we like. And we do like success, but we only like success in light of the challenge required to get us there, which is an art in itself. How much resistance do you put in front of the players before they get to succeed? And I think that is where Ma is beautiful, because it is a function not just of resistance, but also of time and absence. Sometimes it's not about the fact that it took us, it was very, very difficult to do. Sometimes it's just that the feeling of time. I'm actually experiencing a bit of this right now in my home game. My players are in a very remote part of the world. And it took them quite a long time to get there in the context of in-universe time. And it means that they want to make their time there meaningful, because it'll also take them a long time to get back. The way I impressed that time upon them is I spent about 30 minutes of real in-game time just describing them moving over land and nothing else.
Yeah.
From a gameplay perspective, you might say, well, that's very, very boring. But it totally set up where we are in the narrative arc, and where we are would not have the same sense of consequence if I hadn't done that. If it felt like they could just yada yada and overland travel montage their way back to the rest of the setting, they wouldn't be treating their actions in this current environment with so much gravity, because they understand now as players how far away this is, which means they understand that they cannot ever come back here easily and possibly at all.
Yeah, that makes me realize this is huge. I just realized when we get into high level, especially high level play in something like a 5e, so like a high fantasy game, a lot of the mechanics that can be present, especially at those higher levels, eliminate the need for moments like that. I think about fast travel. I think about the sorts of abilities of things like legend lore.
Spells like Gate.
Yes, absolutely. Like I go like the access to knowledge and transportation, because I like, and this is purely mostly from a viewer looking at your Critical Roles, your other big series. I feel like there is an absence of space and taking in the world that is present at lower levels of play, but can at the moments where you want everything to feel as impactful as possible, can feel super absent because of the power that the players the players have at that moment.
And I think it's look, that's a particularly pronounced problem in 5th edition, because higher levels get very asymmetric, and it doesn't give you enough tools and frameworks to support that high level play, so that you can still have those same levels of challenge as what you have at lower levels, but also those same, as you say, those same moments of absence, the same pacing and beats. You inherently lose them. And funny enough, I think there's this strange legacy reason that comes from that same player naivety that I was touching on earlier, where you instinctively think when you're at low levels, man, if I could be a really powerful wizard that could just teleport everywhere, that would be so sick. And yeah, it is sick, like twice. And then you realize you miss traveling through the world. You are like missing your own life as that character because you spend all your time hopping from place to place to place.
Yeah, and in those contexts, I do feel like the characters gain a certain they feel less grounded because there is less space around them for the characters to feel, even if it's in Ma that is not described by the GM. Like there is just an inherent mental understanding that between this moment and this moment, days passed, life was lived. These images flash through my mind as I imagine when the GM says a summer passes.
So here's my fix for this in 5e. I was maybe going to save this for another episode, but I think it's actually super relevant here. And some 5e derived systems can run into similar issues with high level play. My fix for it, especially in 5th edition, lean in. Okay, your party can now willingly pop from place to place. They're operating up here on these cosmic stakes. They are no longer interested in protecting the small town. They may see the need for it, but they understand that they're a bigger fish to fry, and there are not as many people in the realm as capable as they are to face down these much larger threats. And that is where we introduce a disconnect, a loss of humanity. And this is something I love doing in higher level play. Okay, you can now blink from place to place to place. You teleport back into, the city that you used to, have to travel a couple of weeks to. You've been here dozens of times. You visit all the old haunts. Someone has had a baby. In the time that you've been gone. So, as you say, so much life has happened. Time has passed. Things have moved. The people there are surprised to see you. They, try to start talking to you about how things are with the missus and all those low stakes things that you used to feel very invested in. And you're like, I don't have time for that. I need to buy the most powerful potions you have in the store. And then they say, my potions are too powerful for you. Fun fact, the guy who did the potion seller YouTube bit wrote the screenplay for the movie Challengers.
Really?
Yep. You want to hear my review for Challengers?
Okay.
Challengers is a movie about sex and tennis, and I hate tennis. 5 out of 5 stars. Back to the actual point. I actually think what you then do is you do the loss of humanity. Now, what we do, we still lose Ma, but what we get is pathos.
Yeah. Well, I go like the characters realize that loss. That's so gorgeous. I've always wondered about like ways of basically creating drama at high level play, and what you've identified there is like a way of bringing it into story. That's so gorgeous. It's so interesting, that thing of like what the players want is not necessarily. Yeah, it's because it can feel.
Your players don't always know what's good for them.
It's such a hard thing when you're because you're like, as a GM, like you realize that you are steering the story, and it's really tricky. It makes me think of when I first encountered Ma, the idea of Ma. It was in an interview between Roger Ebert and Miyazaki, Hayao Miyazaki. Do you know this interview?
I know of it.
Again. Yeah, and it's mostly Miyazaki correcting Ebert on a bunch of like misconceptions about his films, as is fairly common. But Ebert says like there are these things, they function like Japanese pillow words, and then Miyazaki goes, no, they're not pillow words, they're Ma. Like, and he talks about how at that time American children's cinema is a little bit like all the boss fight encounters, like pump, 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 pump. Whereas like what he goes like in his films, like he's experimenting, like willingly, like going like pushing the idea of like how much space you can create.
How much time we just spend in a world before anything really happens.
Yeah.
Again, God, I sound like I'm really banging the drum and trying to like get people to back us. I mean, you should still back us on Patreon, make no mistake.
This is 3 for 3 now.
We talked about the concept of Kisho Tenketsu.
Yes.
The sort of low conflict stories and the sort of difference in pace, the amount of time, the amount of extra time we spend in the world with our status quo compared to the more conventional, hero's journey 3-act structure type that we're a lot more familiar with.
You send your heroes overland for all those months. That's the train journey in Spirited Away.
Yeah.
Like it's the moment where you see a villain, where you see No Face, and you see Chihiro just sitting together, and it's this long reflective section that then gives context to the sort of heroic deeds that Chihiro then goes on to do in the latter quarter of that film.
I'm going to nerd out a little bit about Kurosawa here, because you brought him up when we were initially talking about this. The places, the places in his films where seemingly nothing is happening, and similar to the train journey, where you're just sort of taking in the world and the place and the sense of wonder. Something that Kurosawa does incredibly. I love his work for this. The frame is. Or not the frame is very static, but within the frame there is constant motion. And there is usually 2 or 3 different kinds of motion. There might be rain lashing across from one side and a flag flapping in the wind going in the opposite direction. And there might be a character walking very, very slowly away from us. And those 3 things of motion are happening simultaneously. The shot hangs for quite some time. It is a moment of Ma, a moment where nothing is happening. We don't really need to see this character walking away for so long for narrative purposes, but it gives us this pause, this necessary negative space. However, Kurosawa makes sure that negative space is still full. It is full of movement and motion. And I go back to my 30 minutes of Overland. It was filled with luxurious descriptions of things. It was filled with long pauses. I told it like I was, regaling one of the sagas. I was a storyteller around the fire, and my players let me have that space to do that, which was great. But it wasn't actually nothing. I was still giving them something. It was just description. It wasn't gameplay, but they were still getting something. That 30 minutes was full. It was just full of a different kind of thing that let us sit back, be a bit more inward rather than so proactive and, rolling dice and flapping through character sheets and so on. So the way that Ma is actually delivered, despite being the absence, it is actually filled with something else that we often don't give as much time and energy and thought to.
And I go as a new GM, it's quite scary too, because especially with new players, you give a lavish description of a town, and then player number 3 just gets hooked on a detail that you did not intend to be the action. You intended it to be part of the beautiful portraiture of like what you're setting up. But like because we are only using our words most typically, it's dangerous because then what if something extraneous, which is like not you being extraneous, it's you trying to give that sense of Ma, becomes the problematic hook that your players get like deep diving into. That makes me think a lot about how I've changed my narration over the course of the years in order to either label or mark when those things are happening in a way that's really, really clear for us all. So cool, because I can conceive of it visually a lot. When we talk about it in film, Ma is really, really apparent to me. And yeah, the feeling of it happening at the table is sometimes present, but it's so much harder to articulate because it is in the way that you capture or present information. Also makes me think of, I often get my players, I do this a lot in Fury of the Small podcast, listen please, that there are sections where I want there to be a sense of Ma, and then I realize that I give the players the power to go like, what are the details of the bit of the world you're passing through? They know that they're not important to the plot. They know that it's there to feed the magic of the forest that they're in one way or another.
But it's still giving the monkey brain something to do.
Yes.
You know, it's they are still getting to be proactive just from a conceptual and storytelling standpoint rather than from an action standpoint. And I think that makes all the difference.
Huge. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking this time to be reflective for us.
I think it would be really funny if on the end of this we left a minute of silence.
Can we?
Let's do that.
16 minutes. Could you fade in some nature sounds?
I'll see if we can get production to do that.
Okay. Like birdsong.
I wish I'd brought my train whistle again.
Yeah, remember the whistle. We're still in, Ma.
We'll see you in the next one. If you're enjoying listening to The One Shot Show, why not support us on Patreon? Go to patreon.com/OneShotShow, where you'll be able to find video versions of our episodes, long-form bonus episodes that we release every single month, access to our community Discord server. You can pose questions for our special Q&A episodes, and if you're back at the higher tiers, you can even vote on what questions we cover in our show. Check it out.